Welcome to Telltales. I'm Mike Nicoletti. Every week, along with my co-hosts Jason Wallace and Hunt Lawrence, we bring you the Cash Flow Memo. Get it at telltales.us. For the next 30 minutes, we're going to dive deep into energy, technology, and healthcare. So download the memo now and get started.
The following conversation is intended for informational purposes only. You should always do your own work to determine if an investment is suitable for you.
You guys have to carry the ball on healthcare surprises. I have one, but I think I want to go last. We did 5.5 on the energy stuff. I'll hold it till you guys run through your surprises.
Well, let's let Jason kick this off. I've got one too, but we'll cover that one after you run through yours.
So next to last, okay.
Next to last, yeah.
Next to last.
My first surprise then is that 2026 is going to be the largest year for pharma M&A ever. The previous largest, inflation adjusted, was 1999, which had several extremely large deals. But the reason I say that this year is because by 2030, there's a large amount of drugs going off patent that represent, according to different estimates, between 200 and 300 billion in annual sales. The average revenue multiple that biotechs are purchased for is around six times revenue, forward sales. So that would suggest in the next couple of years, big pharma is going to have to do essentially $1 trillion in deals. What we saw in 2025 was a very quiet year until the last 4 months of the year when the bulk of the activity occurred. And 2025 ended up being a pretty decent year for M&A transactions in the pharma industry. Some tailwinds going in as interest rates are going down, regulatory uncertainties starting to get figured out. And I think this year and next year are going to be huge years for M&A.
So that $1 trillion is just to maintain flat sales year over year.
Right. And assuming there's a little, these companies have their own pipelines, so some of those drugs will come to fruition. But yeah, largely replacing revenue. Second prediction is a holdover from last year. I do think at some point RFK and the FDA ban the use of high fructose corn syrup in our food. I think that's an easier strategy to improve our food supply rather than ending corn subsidies, which put the high fructose corn syrup in use in the first place. Third surprise is I believe a cell or gene therapy platform will be approved this year that is a functional cure for Parkinson's disease. So depends on a few things, but there's a couple companies that have really advanced earlier stage research in human clinical trials. The data looks extremely promising. I feel like there's a potential that the FDA grants one of those a national priority review voucher, which results in an immediate review. And by the end of the year, we see one of those, essentially a functional cure for Parkinson's approved.
That would be awesome.
Very. Yeah. And I think, then a side effect to that would be kind of reignite the optimism around cell and gene therapy that kind of went away in the last year with some of the appointees at the FDA.
Yep.
I've got a question for Jason. Do you think RFK Jr. makes it through another year in his post?
I do. I think flipping the food pyramid upside down is a popular decision.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. The vaccine debate, I think, is interesting. I think if people were honest and had a real debate about it, and they wouldn't see that both sides are that far off. I think both sides are too dug in politically. I don't think the debate's that vaccines are effective and that we should ban them. It's just the schedule of when they should be given to children.
Right. And what should be optional versus effectively mandatory. Okay. So I thought I finally had a good one. I'm going to present that, and then Jason can tell you why it's not a good one. So I thought it would be a surprise that we will have a agentic doctor prescribe medication. So that will require some regulatory clearances and all of that sort of stuff.
I think that's not going to be a surprise given one of the announcements at the JP Morgan conference was that the state of Utah is launching a pilot program where an AI agent is going to handle, in certain cases, prescription refills, trying to reduce the process that if you have a monthly refill or quarterly, or you might have to go see a doctor just for them to write the script, try to eliminate some of that overhead.
So in an effort to not just sandbag here, I think we should keep it on the list, if not only to see where this goes, maybe beyond that, because there's a lot of bottlenecks in the healthcare system, and you can definitely make a case for certain interactions to be agentic.
So it's an easy win.
I think so.
Now we're just 5. I guess we don't need 5.5. My prediction, which is backed up by 2 pieces of paper that I did over the long weekends, over the New Year's weekend, explores the possibility of seeing Donald J. Trump and Bernie Sanders at the same lecterns announcing that the people not covered by employer plans or by currently in Medicare would be eligible to come into Medicare. What this would do is there would no longer be a need for Medicaid, and it would not be possible to be uninsured. In other words, you'd be assigned a number. So I've got a bunch of material from the Kaiser Foundation and others from different government entities, and I'm going to read off some numbers, but Michael put this up on the website so people can look at it. I believe paragraph 1 says, with the 320 million of us, 180 million of us have employer health care. And that would include private companies, state jobs. About 40 million are direct purchase. I think most of those are eligible for the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. And there are about 30 million that are considered to be uninsured. So we have the Medicare population, which is currently 70 million, would double to 140 million. There's some statistics which I've extracted that shows what we spend on healthcare, and it's $4.5 trillion, which is about 15% of our 30 trillion GNP. Most of our comparable countries in Europe spend about 10% of GNP. It looks as though the cost of healthcare for people insured by employers is around $10,000 a person. It also looks as though Medicare, 70 million people on Medicare, are around $15,000 per person. And what happens is if you take the remainder of the 4.5 trillion and you divide by 70 million, you get this absurdly high number, like 24,000 per person. And that's clearly wrong. And we'll work over the succeeding weeks or weekends to try to figure out why that is so high. I suspect what's happened there is there's healthcare costs that go beyond what an employer covers or what Medicare covers, and somehow we have to allocate that spending to the people covered by employer healthcare or Medicare. In terms of the impact on the deficit, which we just looked at with Exhibit A, if you recovered all the money spent on Medicaid, which is around $600 million by the federal government and $500 million by states, and if you couldn't reduce the spending, your impact on the U.S. deficit would be a negative $600 million, which would be terrible. In order to get to break even, you'd have to reduce spending rather than 24,000 per person. You have to get it down to around 16. So you'd have to have a savings in order to break even on a federal level. As I say, Mike posts this on the website. Going to continue to work on this. In time, when we're more confident about the numbers, going to write this up as a possibility and see if we can get experts from healthcare to debate the idea, and to the extent that they get comfortable with the wording, collect as many signatures as you can from people who are prominent in healthcare. The problem with the Republicans' position on healthcare is they're against the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare. They never seem to come up with anything else. Now, they do come up with health savings plans, and I think Mike and Jason will comment that they think that's a good idea, and that may be, but I'm not sure that's going to be enough to satisfy the people who are not on Medicare and not on employer health plans that they are getting properly covered. That, Jason, you're a healthcare expert. What's your commentary on a surprise like that?
Well, it certainly would be a surprise, but Donald Trump loves to negotiate. So if he's negotiating, and he's been kind of leading the efforts on drug pricing as paid through Medicare. So he probably wouldn't relish the opportunity to negotiate the cost of healthcare for every American. It's interesting, something to think about for sure.
I'd take it a step further. I actually think this is going to be probably whoever wins the next presidential election will be the person that's able to unify the left and the right around something along these lines. And basically to get there, you have to have a economic plan that doesn't include additional deficit spending. And you have to have a healthcare plan that is better than the one that we currently have today.
I mean, a good issue, which comes immediately to mind, and as writing it down, we'll try to come up with solutions to this, is how do you keep employers from, say, just dumping employees saying, hey, look, you can go to Medicare. This is costing us a lot of money. We'll all be better off. We'll really have something to discuss this afternoon, but obviously to make some kind of a serious paper on this, that's a subject that'll have to be addressed.
Or it could be a good employee benefit that you have a plan above and beyond Medicare.
Yeah, it could be why all the health insurers are going to be coming to the White House. Is it next week? Yeah, whatever it is, very soon, because obviously it means somewhat of a change of their course of business. But remember, many of these insurers run the Medicare plans. So it's just reallocating the pie.
Yeah, I'm not sure the government can run these things. I mean, I'm looking for the page with UnitedHealthcare, but UnitedHealthcare has been a good investment for a long period of time. They've certainly run into, this is page 19, certainly run into some heavy weather now. And we don't exactly know how much of their $25 billion of free cash flow comes from their PBM, their pharmacy benefit management. But, that particular type of service is really under attack with, more and more pharmaceutical companies going direct or selling, rather than through PBMs. Jason's been very outspoken on the efficiency of skipping the PBMs. So
the carrot to break up UnitedHealthcare is they're going to run Medicare.
Yeah, I suspect that's true. And of course, here's an area where, we've to switch back to page one with the thing that's dominated 25 and probably continue to be the most important factor in 26 from an investment point of view in tech is large language models and AI. And certainly trying to keep track of medical records and trying to be more efficient would be a great use of language models.
Along those lines, OpenAI released a HIPAA-compliant ChatGPT health application. So they're going to segregate the data that you put into that particular chat It won't be part of your profile. They won't use it for training, but you can ask it, for health related advice.
And then Anthropic also released, I think it's more developer side tools that you can build AI workflows into HIPAA-compliant applications. And then Google also released, I think it's a new model that's healthcare based. And obviously with JP Morgan Healthcare this week, it's a good week to showcase what you've been working on.
Right.
So I know OpenAI released a statistic on how many users have asked health related questions. I'm one of them.
No, it's got to be 100%.
It wasn't 100%, but yeah, I don't know how they judge it. I'll say my experience, I put, my blood panels, my blood work in there because your doctor spends about 30 seconds, going over it with you. And the language model discussed every point on there, explained the reasoning behind it and why these measurements are taken. So it was extremely educational for me.
Despite all the publicity on Venezuela and now Iran, I don't think there's too much to comment on Exhibit C. We did have Iranian oil being up a little, 3 million barrels a day production in 26, up from 2.8 last year. And that may not happen with all the demonstrations and whatnot going on in Iran. Venezuela is so small that it isn't broken out here. It's under 1 million barrels a day. Price of oil is remarkably resilient, but the publicity on areas where oil is produced, like Venezuela and Iran, Venezuela will not be a great deal more oil. It's very heavy and hard to produce, and so 1 million barrels a day might turn into 1.2 million or 1.3 million, but not too much more than that. So it doesn't really impact oil demand balance. So it's possible that oil will hold into the kind of $60 WTI range, despite the case that it could trade significantly lower, like low 50s. But there's enough macro activity going on, so that's one of the possible outcomes. Exhibit B, production is alarmingly high. Here the estimate for 26 is 108.5 BCF a day, and we're reaching that based on the Platts numbers in January. So the culprit, once again, is the Permian, more than the Haynesville or the Marcellus. And gas pricing, at least last Thursday, had gotten down for 26, it got down to $3.50. That a few weeks ago was $4.25. So that is something to watch for sure. The other interesting statistic, it's just January, but once again, gas to make power, which was consistently up for 4 or 5 years, was flat in 25, actually down a little. It's actually down a little in January to date. So everyone says data center, and the gas is the answer. But I think what's happened is coal plants are being allowed to stay open. And for many years, all that was added was solar and wind. And now those projects, even though new ones aren't started, those are being finished. And so consequently, it's not 24-hour power, 7-day-a-week power, but it is there. And I think it is reducing the amount of gas required to make power. The good news in gas is those LNG feed gas numbers. That's forecasted here to be 17.5 Bs a day. It's running 18 or 18.5 in January, so that's very good news for gas. Exhibit A, macro, nothing really to report here. We are going to get a Supreme Court decision here at some point on tariffs. If the Supreme Court decides against the Trump administration or other ways to have the tariffs restored to be what they are now, but it definitely will impact some of the revenue coming in from tariffs in 26. But key here is to sit on spending. And if we go down you have Exhibit A in front of you. Social Security is whatever it's going to be. Medicare, we're going to talk about in a while because we're going to talk about 5 surprises for healthcare, and I have one. Medicaid, I show here that Medicaid was significantly lower in 25 versus 24. I have to check that number. That seems so unlikely. But that's the data sources I'm looking at. That's what they say. Interest, I mean, I think interest, even though the debt will be higher, could be flat. Defense, we all saw Trump come out saying we should be spending not $1 trillion, but $1.5 trillion on defense. I don't think that is something that is likely to happen. I think as evidenced by the success in Venezuela, I think we're getting our money's worth out of the $900 billion a year or so that we spend on defense. I continue to harp that all other category, even if we got it down to $1.1 trillion, is still $200 billion more than it was in 2019, the year before COVID. On the other hand, it got down to $1.3 trillion last year. There is some discipline there because, as you can see, it ballooned to almost $3 trillion in 20 and 21. So bringing that down has been an achievement, and more progress there would be great. The key here is to get the deficit down to $1.5 trillion in the fiscal year we're in, and then get it down to $1.2 trillion or $1.1 trillion or something in 27. At some point, that debt held by public as a percentage of GMP will start to come down. News this week, Apple and Google seem to have, they kind of announced that Apple was going to use the Gemini model to upgrade Siri. But then they had an announcement this week. I guess it went from letter of intent to actual contract. Like Jason, is this going to enable Alpha to get some of that $20 billion a year that they send to Apple for being the default choice for search?
I thought it is $1 billion, I think is the amount that they penciled this thing at, is the lowest number that Google could reasonably charge to Apple to do this, which tells me that they're not trying to extract pain here, that they're probably playing a long game of trying to get them to not invest in any of their own large language stuff. So I think it's a win for Apple consumers. It's good for Apple. It's also very good for Google. But will Google start to extract more from the relationship than they have in the past? I'm kind of skeptical on that one.
I think the value could be realized years out, and it could be enormous. The more I think about the language models, today there's no switching cost. I can use any of them. But in the future, if these things really do have a memory of every interaction you've had with it, they really have a view into your entire life. And that's the stickiness. If you can't replicate that between models, if you've used one for years and it knows everything about you. So I think Google trying to capture that with Gemini is going to be enormously valuable.
This weekend, I upgraded the Walmart page 8, and I apologize, but in prior versions, once I really pulled Walmart apart, I realized I had a much lower level of free cash flow than is really there. And have the free cash flow for Walmart up at $20 billion. And to a very real extent in retail or delivery, it's basically Amazon and Walmart. Mike and I were talking this morning, one of the other companies on the Walmart page is Target. It's really kind of appetizing. It's trading for not too much more than 10 times free cash flow. But trying to compete with Walmart and Amazon with their 4-hour delivery, and Walmart, putting up a pretty good, pretty competitive service. It's pretty hard for other retailers like Target to try to compete with those two. Now, it turns out Amazon and Walmart have the same amount of free cash flow but look at page 1. I mean, there's no one who spends of their cash flow the way Amazon does. Amazon has an R&D budget of $92 billion. That's bigger than Apple at 34, bigger than Alphabet at 56, bigger than Microsoft at 33. Their CapEx is $110 billion. And of course, Apple distinguished itself by having fairly low CapEx, only $12 billion. And Alphabet is, very active building out. But and Microsoft, but I mean, 110 for Amazon, 80 for Alphabet, and 70 for Microsoft. So it's really quite remarkable how much money Amazon puts back in the business. It means that the value times free cash flow for Walmart's about 30, and golly, it's like in the 80s for Amazon. But it would be hard to judge one against the other that way, given what Amazon has been able to build and and continues to try to push forward. Jason, Mike and I were talking this morning, and we were saying, is Andy Jassy, the follow-on CEO at Amazon, as able as Jeff Bezos was? I think the answer we both gravitated to, and we're interested in your view, is he's probably an upgrade from the last couple of years of Jeff Bezos, under the theory that Jeff Bezos has gone through a divorce, and Amazon had really overexpanded in COVID. So we're figuring that normally these companies really suffer when the founder, becomes interested in something else or goes off and works on philanthropic activities. But we think Amazon with Jassy is pretty well led at this point.
I agree. And I bet Jassy still has a founder mentality, being the one that started AWS.
Right.
So I agree. He's been a great leader there.
Right. Just like we still have 3 or 4 minutes left. As we get through the year end and look forward into 26, we have a number of companies that are flirting with being worth $4 trillion. Alphabet made it this week. Apple's been there, is now down a little. Microsoft has been there, but at least as of prices last Friday, Nvidia is king of the hill at $4.5 trillion. And it's amazing how profitable Nvidia is. I mean, Nvidia does that on $200 billion of revenues. Apple's 400, Amazon's 700. Of course, Amazon has all the resale. Alphabet's 390, Microsoft is 290. It's just as we ease into the new year, how sustainable it. I mean, they have, this is on not a trailing 12 months basis, kind of a current basis, the way I do these numbers, but you have 200 billion of revenues and just under 100 billion of free cash flow. That's after tax, after CapEx, after everything. Is being able to bring half of their revenue down to free cash flow, do you think that's sustainable, not just for 26, but the couple of years, say 26, 27, and 28, or will somehow that ability to bring revenue down to free cash flow be compromised?
I think it's a matter of having the best product and maintaining product leadership. And what we saw from CES, the announcement at CES, is that Nvidia pretty squarely has a firm grasp on data center architecture, with Google maybe being the only other one that has a credible alternative. So will they be able to maintain the margins? I think so. You look at the expectations for hyperscaler CapEx, so those are the top 5 largest players. That's $600 billion for 2026. And historically, about half of the revenue has come from, at Nvidia, has come from the top hyperscalers, with the other half coming from, call it everybody else, the neoclouds, sovereign AI, number of different enterprises and whatnot. So you're looking at $1.2 trillion opportunity, and likelihood that revenues should be 20-ish% of that for Nvidia. So looks like they're pretty squarely where they need to be.
Yeah, I think they continue to capture the margin as well because they're not just supplying the processors, they're supplying in this next generation of servers, it's integrated liquid cooling, specifically designed for the server. It's not kind of added as an after the fact design. They are today the largest supplier of networking equipment. They're larger than Cisco in the networking business. And all of that's packaged together. So they're capturing the margin of the integrator as well. And I think that continues. They have such a head start, aside from Google's TPU system, but they have a head start over everyone else that they're going to continue to capture that margin.
I haven't reversed this with Mike and Jason, but we're through our 3 Wednesdays of surprises for 26. And I think a useful thing to do over the next 2 Wednesdays would be, we've got about 80 companies on this 20 pages. I think we ought to go through all of them with a commentary. It may be very brief about impact of China on their 26 and 27 results. Nvidia being a case in point. I think Nvidia has taken a position that they were not allowed to ship their Hoppers or H100s into China, and now apparently they are, with a certain amount of regulatory scrutiny by the U.S. government. But also on this page, we have Taiwan Semiconductor. Obviously, if Taiwan were invaded, that would have a huge impact there. So I think spending the next 2 Wednesdays on the impact of China's business on all 80 of the companies that are set forth on this 20 pages makes some sense. So with that, we're through our extra 5 minutes. Everyone be well and stay healthy, and we'll be back with you in exactly 7 days. Take care, everyone. Thanks for listening.
The views expressed on this podcast are the hosts alone and do not constitute an offer to sell or a recommendation to purchase or a solicitation of an offer to buy any security nor a recommendation for any investment product or service. While certain information contained herein has been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, neither the hosts nor any of their employers or their affiliates have independently verified this information, and its accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed. Accordingly, no representation or warranty, expressed or implied, is made as to and no reliance should be placed on the fairness, accuracy, timeliness, or completeness of this information. The hosts and all employers and their affiliated persons assume no liability for this information and no obligation to update the information or analysis contained herein in the future, and may or may not hold positions in the securities mentioned.